let's talk about the talk box. That sounds corny. Anyways, most of us think of the talk box as being kind of, very locked into the 70s or the 70s sound, classic rock or funk. But the effect actually goes back quite a ways. In the late 30s, a jazz guitarist by the name of Alvino Ray kind of got the same effect. I mean, for the most part, he did, but a different system. So he took the intercom or the little radios that hook up to the throat, they wrap around the throat, that you'd see like bomber jets from World War II using, and he reversed the signal so that he could run his pedal steel guitar signal through there, and then his wife would sing along with his playing. And there's actually some videos you can find on YouTube. There's one where he's got this little creepy puppet sitting on a chair, mouthing the words. I think they call it stringy or something. No. It's pretty creepy. But it's a good example of his talking guitar, as he put it. And he'd do things like do quick tone swells with his pedal steel and create kind of a wow effect. So he was very ahead of his time with all of that. Now, if you fast forward to the 60s, you then come across another pedal steel player by the name of Pete Drake, who, he was a country picker, so not jazz anymore, but a country picker who developed a talk box that more closely resembles what we sampled here, where you have the tube in the mouth and you kind of lip sync with your instrument. And he has some really cool examples. He recorded Abilene. There's a song called Forever or Forever Yours, where it's hauntingly beautiful the way he does it, and he's got a choir singing along with them, and it's a really cool example. Now, Pete Drake also was really responsible for introducing Peter Frampton to the talk box. I mean, Peter Frampton is really who everybody thinks of when they think of the talk box. And so much so that now Peter Frampton actually produces and sells his own talk boxes. But in 1970 or so, Pete Drake and Peter Frampton were doing session work with George Harrison at Abbey Road Studio, and that's when Frampton first heard the talk box. No. Going back just a little bit, in 1969, the first commercially available talk box was on the market, and this was referred to as the bag. It was basically, the unit, the speaker driver system with the tube coming out of this bag that you would put on your shoulder, and you could play. It had some limitations, besides being kind of awkward to carry around this thing with the tube hanging out. Even though, players like Joe Perry from Aerosmith does that still and does it really well with Sweet Emotion and other songs. It was a little cumbersome, and it didn't have a lot of volume, so it didn't work as well live as it did in the studio. But you can hear examples of, say, I think Rocky Mountain Way, Joe Walsh, Sex Machine, Fine Gemstones. I think Jeff Beck used it. Various other artists. Anyways, a little bit later, a gentleman by the name of Bob Heil started tweaking the Pete Drake talk box and the bag talk box and created his own, so that it would have more power and be louder for live performances. And this is that unit. This is what we sampled. Okay, so we have to cut for a second because I'm gonna pick up my little doggie. This is Daisy Buttercup. And she's a sweetheart, huh? You want to say hi? Oh, thank you. You want to say hi to everybody? Okay, designing a talk box is pretty simple. It's a speaker in an enclosure with, a hole in it. So the sound is isolated into the hole. You put a surgical tubing into the hole, runs up into your mouth, and when you play your instrument, you can shape, say words with the notes that you play, or shape the sound the way you want it. What? You want down now? Do you want down now? Now, you have to have an amp to use the unit. I mean, without it, you're not going to get any sound. You need enough power to drive the speaker and, of course, get the volume. You don't want to blow the speaker by putting too many watts into it. And, of course, if you're using a tube amp, you need to make sure that it's graded for the correct ohms. Otherwise, you could fry your whole amp, catch on fire, all that good stuff. It's not something you want to do. The other thing you really need, obviously, besides your mouth and the instrument, is a microphone. So in the case of this library, I experimented with a few different mics, some vintage things. I ended up using a Shure 58. A 57 would have been a lot easier to use because it doesn't have the large windscreen. But there are some slight differences between a 57 and 58, at least to my ears. I think 57s tend to be a little crisper on the high end, and I really wanted a rounder mid-range that was just full. So that's what I ended up using. I also used a tube amp, so you could get that natural saturation. One of the things that really happens with talk boxes, you can plug any instrument into it that's electric, needs to be amplified. But with a guitar, it really works best when you have a little bit of saturation. So, any kind of harmonic complexities that can be in the signal help to bring out a lot of the words, helps it to sustain, and so on. If you're using a synth, then, certain waveforms are better than others to use. So it just kind of depends. For my purposes, I went ahead and gave you a nice tube saturation, nothing too heavy, but enough to really help the talk box shine, come out, sing, feel alive. As far as guitars, I didn't want to focus too much on talking about the guitar today. I went ahead and sampled my vintage melody maker with the super distortion pickup, so I could push the tube amp just a little bit more. Yeah, it's it's hard to look cool playing the talk box, or at least it is for me. So I probably won't sample too much where you're getting a nice close-up of my mug on it. But if you're starting to play talk box, just be prepared to drool a lot at first. Get a little frustrated when you can't say certain words with it. Having this tube in your mouth. All right, baby. All right. Yeah, I mean, really, you just put the tube in between your teeth. Don't go too deep. So for this library and sampling it, I tried to give you a really nice variety of usable talk box sounds. You have, wah and mow and and all that kind of stuff. There's some variation where I give you some palette kind of vibrato with some of them. There's some palm muting where you morph between different tone shapes, and there's a whole Solfege section which is super cool. Fixed do, so C is always do. Short, also long sustains, and program so you can kind of do it in sharp keys or flat keys. Meaning, if it's going up, then a D chord is, re, the F sharp is fa, and the A is la. Whereas if I'm doing a flat key going down, then that F sharp is now a sol. So, it has its limitations, obviously, depending on how you treat your harmony and how extended it gets and certain keys as well. But, you can put them side by side in Soundpaint and kind of do what you need. I gave you some random sounds, and by that I mean musical tones, some bends, some various things that, you can't just get with single note soloing and or single note sampling. So, well, after I did it, made me think a little bit of David Gilmour, Pink Floyd, Pig solo. So you get some of those kind of out there sounds, but very usable, musical. There are various words, obviously. I can't give you a huge vocabulary to go through, but there's some random word programs where you can make sentences or you take parts of words. There's a few words that we focused on sampling. So, like the word baby, and I did it a couple different ways. So baby just by itself, where it's fairly short. Baby where it's long, where the bay is your sustain and B is a release trigger, and it's just all one word. Of course, that one you have to be a little more patient when you're playing. You don't want to do fast runs because you're going to have a lot of bleed over. But it can be a nice effect for length and things like that. So you can end a phrase with it or something. There's also bay by itself and B by itself. So you can put those side by side and switch accordingly. Just a lot. I mean, it's a really big library. You get that kind of vintage 70s sound, but it easily goes into the 80s, 90s, into now. I mean, talk boxes. By default, I think we just kind of think of it as an effect from the 70s, but you still hear it today in music. So use it however you feel it's appropriate or inappropriate. I had a blast making it. My cheek didn't, but I did. So enjoy it. It was fun to do. Took a while, and there'll be more to come. So stay tuned for that as well. All right.
It has the most like vintage Herbie Hancock kind of like vibe. Let me try to play this all right thing in context to music. Just check it out. It's so funky. So in this one here, there's a lot of all rights going on. If we look at the first one up here, and that just keeps repeating. Notice here on the keys. So on some of these parts we have in the library here, they're using release triggers for the second part of the phrase. So if you say all right, you're gonna get all when you hit down and right when you let go. That allows you to play chords like. But you can also hold it down, it sustains a little bit. So That's super cool for that Daft Punk kind of style. But if you want to make it more playable, sometimes you want an entire syllable just in one chunk here. This is where our short articulations comes into play. So up here, we were listening to a longer version here called All Right Long. But if you look down here, you're going to see this one is called All Right Short, meaning that it's just one phrase. It makes it a little more playable as a solo instrument. I mean, there's nothing that can replicate that sound. There's no plugins, there's nothing. It really requires a talk box, an amp, and a real human being to do these things. And if you notice here, we also have the offset button, which can be useful for phrases. So cool. And if you listen carefully here, it's not the same note when you play the key more than once. Like here. All right. One more time. All right. They're not the same. So you can hear like not the same sample. All right. All right. All right. It might sound similar, but there's micro variations in them. But before we get into it, I should probably introduce what this library is actually about. Obviously, we saw Darren's beautiful intro. This is the talk box, and I realized I actually just got into it without totally forgetting how to introduce it. The talk box is, as Darren presented, a beautiful instrument. I don't even know if you can, is it an instrument or is it an effect? I'm not even sure. Let me know what you think. But it's certainly a playable instrument on the keyboard in the end, combining a plastic tube, some pedals, amps, all that stuff together, and a guitar and a human voice, and there we have it. It's so cool, by the way, that we can play it polyphonically on the keyboard, something you can't do when you have a monophonic kind of vibe to it. But it's a cool vintage instrument. I think it's the most funky thing we've ever created for Soundpaint. It has a super Herbie Hancock kind of vibe to it. There's no other way to describe it. You can almost play it like a funky kind of clavinet. Isn't that cool? It's just funky. And clavinet is the first thing that comes to mind. And I think it's partially because it comes from a guitar. And then, of course, you have the whole human vocalization in it as well. I'm so excited to just show you this library here. Before we get into it, let me just mention that this is an ultra deep sample library. It contains over 4,100 different talkbox vocal real-time samples, which is an enormous amount when you put them together. It has like, I don't know, 83 programs and 38 parts, something crazy. And as you can see, they're round robin based. There's so much you can do. We even have different ones where they generate different words based on every key. We're gonna go through all that. If you look here in the DAW, you're gonna notice there's already mini demos prepared here. I love jamming to this thing instead of just playing it solo. So you're gonna hear some different things going on here. We had an 808 from Soundpaint rocking on top of some sort of vintage chords in the beginning here. Let me go back to this demo here and try to play another groove, but in the same kind of vibe. Also using the Soundpaint 808 here, which is just another great vintage instrument. And this one here is so cool because it uses random words on every key. And it makes it strangely playable. Up here, it's so sensitive. And also because we don't have the same sample every time you click the key here, even when you do these repeated kind of notes, they get a lot more alive. It's just so playable. That's the same patch, the random words. It's just... And also in this one here, I had another one just accentuate that wow kind of sound you get from the talk box. Check this one out here. That kind of almost dubstep-like effect. I just think it's super cool. I also had a Juno 60 from Soundpaint. This is the UDS edition. I love this library. And the brass is coming from RG Brass. Just a super punchy, stabby kind of library. It's so good for that sort of trap kind of vibe, that very modern. It is a brass sound, but brass, stabby, trabby kind of sound. All right, here is another mini demo. In this one here, I'm using 3 different parts. Let me just isolate them here. There's a baby, and there's a doing it, and then there's the random words here. Let me just play them isolated. And if I play them isolated, you got the random words here. One of my favorite programs. Also think like one of the most like, you know, it's a guitar and it's an amp and it's a tube as well, but it has that sort of guitar vibe and it automatically lends itself to sort of guitar playing. I don't know why, but it's probably because it's a guitar in reality. So cool. Let me also play with the doing it here. This is the long version. Again, we have a long version and a short version. In this case here, it's the long doing it. An homage to Herbie Hancock's amazing track. And in the long version here, again, it's based on release trigger. So when you can hold down the key here, then you let go. So doing it. Great for that Daft Punk kind of super funky doing it kind of vibe. But if you look here in the parts, you'll notice just like we had with the short for all right, for doing it here as well, we have the short and the long versions as well. And that goes for other articulations in the library as well. We just wanted to have both approaches because it's not always that you want to have this sort of click release trigger kind of effect. Sometimes you want them fully playable without that as well. But they're super cool to combine together. And in this demo here, that's what I'm doing. I'm using the random words and then some of the longer phrases and then the baby here as well, which is also cool. This is also one of the long phrases for baby. And the notes are held as long as a human being can hold them. And the notes are sustained as long as a human being can hold them. So if I just hold down the key here, you know, that's Darren trying to say baby over the longest possible sustain. If you notice here, when I let go of the key, it's not going to say anything because the system will track where the phrase is. So you don't want to have a baby coming out of the blue. But if you do it within the phrase, as long as you can hear the note, you still trigger that B in the end. I love it. Very, very playable and very good for phrase-like material if you really want to build your own talk box kind of phrases. And combine, they sound like this. And if you look down here in the DAW, you'll notice that there's a lot of pitch bender information. You can play it static as well, but there's something about bending the note in this thing. But granted, you don't do that on a clavinet. There we go. It's funky. It is so funky. You know, it's funny with instruments, like I've sampled a lot of funky stuff over the years, but when we use these vintage techniques and we really ultra deep sample them, there's another level of life and micro randomness, non-linear chaotic factors that plays in that just gives it more life. It is incredibly funky on the keys. And I wish sometimes I could distill the feeling of this and put it inside of the camera so you could feel what it feels like on the keys. But I always come back to the term elastic. There's something just elastic about it. Feels like maybe elastic in my mind, maybe elastic on the keys, but very fulfilling and gratifying. Here's another mini demo for you. Sounds like a DX7 up here. Almost a little bit like FM-like. Let me just take this note here and isolate it. What a sweet synthesizer. I love this one. This is the Mo articulation. Maybe one of my favorite articulations in the entire library because it's so funky and so, I don't know, so Mowish. And I don't know if it's just me, but in all these demos I've done here, I'm very late on the note. I'm very late on the grid. I'm very lazy, if you will. Look closely here and listen as well. This note here should ideally be on the line in a perfectly theoretical world. But who wants a perfectly theoretical world? All we want is groove and soul and life in our music. Let me try to isolate it so you can just hear how sloppy my playing is. I've mentioned this in other videos as well, and for me, live off the grid is the best live inside of the DAW. The invention of MIDI and everything in regards to putting music into the box and especially when it comes to quantization and the notion of grids, are beautiful and has informed us in many styles of music, dance, techno, anything in that realm where you need those static things, and that's a part of the whole vibe. But a lot of music is not on the grid. And every time we go into the vintage domain, I would never work on the grid. So if you look down here, and I've soloed this particular instrument here, you'll notice that I'm always late. All these things here, if I click quantize right now, you'll notice that they all align to the grid and mainly go to the left. But if I undo it, they're all gonna swing to the right here. I'm almost like, a quarter of a bar late or something. And it really just helps give the groove to the instrument. This is what the instrument is communicating that it wants to me. It's gonna sound so weird, but I really try to listen to the instrument sometimes in terms of what they're telling me. Like, instrument, what are you telling me? I'm gonna listen to you. And I think that's a great premise to work in the DAW. Often we want control because we come from this perfectly copy-paste digital world where we want full control over everything. But music is not about that. If anything, it's probably about letting go a little bit of control sometimes. That makes the conversation more alive. Just like right now, I'm starting in this video and my words are coming out more or less randomly. It's a little bit the same in music. Like, it's a language, and imagine me like speaking statically on a grid, how perfectly boring that would be. Listen to this one on its standalone here. And in context to music. It's so sweet. Wow. And it's like Darren talked about with the tube in the mouth. It is really, really difficult to do that. Like, imagine you have like a large surgical tube in your mouth and you're trying to pronounce words. It's not the easiest thing in the world. Here's another little funky mini demo for you. This is just such a sweet patch. So we also did my favorite Wahoohmow articulation as power chords in the guitar. It makes it a little more gritty, grindy, distorty, but yet super funky. And in context to music, dare I say chameleon? Check it out here. This one here, this has nothing to do with the instrument I'm presenting, but I just want to show it quickly. The first one here is the PRS 2020, just playing like a cool guitar riff using our transition articulation. So morphing from very, very percussive palm mutes into like full open string. And you can play the coolest kind of bass grooves because we're stretching all the range down here, so the instrument artificially becomes a bass too. So cool to play over a groove. love that one. And then just a beautiful, soft, brassy 80s pad coming from the Jupiter 8 as well. And together they're just magical. 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 You know, sometimes there's no words for samples. They just happen the way they do. And when we do these sessions, there's magic in them sometimes, and things just come out in a super cool, natural way, supernatural way. This instrument is really a UDS, an ultra deep sample talk box, and I have everything I would ever need to do my talk box things, especially once you start combining multiple phrases, put it all together, layer it any way you want. You can really do most of the things you can imagine with the talk box here. We also have a time module where you can stretch the samples if you want to do that. But let me show you yet another mini demo here. Isn't that sweet? Let me just try to jam a little bit with it here. This one here is using a palm muted ohm through the talk box. So very, very percussive, very, very clavinet-y. You can hear it has that very sort of short percussive, strong attack kind of articulation. So those would be palm mutes here. And if we take a closer look at the articulations here, you'll notice that we have a lot of shorts, we have a lot of longs, all different words, all right, baby, barlon, doing it, funky, mow, oh, and so forth. And right now we're listening to the palm mutes that you'll notice here. We also have the power chords for some of the most common words to it as well. But if you look further down here, we also have all different vowels. You can morph between the vowels. I'm going to show you that as well. We have the random words. We have wah, we have wow, wow. There are so many different words you can do through this thing, and yet it's somewhat limited, as Darren mentioned as well, because when you have this giant thing stuck in your mouth, you are restricted in terms of your advanced vocabulary. So it comes down to these sort of shorter, percussive kind of words. Ohm being one of them, and wow as well. Let me just try the vowel articulation here for funsies. Wow, man. Isn't this nasty? Just a lot of attitude. Let me try the wow wow here. Oh wow wow. So cool. And the wah? And let's try the vowels here since we're doing this anyway. For example, the vowel U. You. Poor Darren. I feel so bad for you, Darren, doing this. You know, one thing is just to do like 2 minutes of talk box for a gig or whatever, but to do a sample library and you sample it, that's a lot of like pipes in the mouth. This is the O vowel. Oh, nice and growly down here. You know, this is not soft stuff. I think the talk box lends itself to like harder kind of stuff, and yet very funky, smoothie California. Like everything I do with this thing here, Tayo mentioned that as well, pretty much makes it sound like California no matter what you do. It just has that Cali kind of vibe to it. This is the I vowel. You know, you almost have to spell it. It's not just like I say I, it's like I. Oi. Oh, so cool. Here's the E vowel. Or the A vowel. And here's a cool thing. If I take these two things here and I morph them, the engine is very graceful. Let me just associate some morph here to my mod wheel so I can morph real time between them here. So going from A to E. Isn't that cool? It's completely fluent. So you can morph between vowels and they just work. A to E. It's like A, and you can do it fast. Or you can do it slow. Or you can go E to A. You can reverse the morph here as well, even though that will sort of do the same thing I just demonstrated. So sweet. So as you can see, there's an enormous amount of articulations here. And if you ever want to build like a really more advanced kind of track saying different words, you just take some of these things, build them together in a couple of different instances of Soundpaint in your DAW, and you can get going. There's enough here to really, really make it your own. And that's what qualifies it as UDS samples. We will most likely never come back and do this again. This is as extensive as it needs to be to do virtually anything you want to do. So let me play you another mini demo here. I think it's so sweet. The first one here is the baby. And then there's two more articulations here. First, the Soflege here. And then we have another one here, which is the muted ohm. And combined, the three of them will sound like. And in the little segment we just heard, you might have noticed there was a 2020 PRS guitar in there as well. Let me just play with it isolated here. I love it so much. And while it has nothing to do with the talk box, they sort of live together. The PRS is beautiful because it's modern and vintage at the same time. And it's so beautiful as a solo instrument as well. Absolutely just love it because you can do these very sort of short percussive kind of things when you play soft in the keys. You hit that hard note, it feels exactly like a guitar. You go from palm mutes and then like hammer it down, and you have every single morphing between all those layers. So from very, very soft and short articulations, you almost has no tone in it. And then you go up here at the velocities, and it gradually just grows a little bit of electricity. That's the beautiful thing about having 127 morphing velocities between you from going from a very short sort of percussive articulation and then into full open string. It's so freaking sweet. right, so that was the talk box in context to other musical instruments. Let me try to play with it more standalone, just using the different programs here in a more sort of naked way, so you can hear what this instrument really sounds like on its own. Very flavorful. It can be many different things, from ambiences to arps to lead synthesizers to funky clavinets. It could be so many different things. So I'm just going to browse through some random programs here and have some fun noodling around. Cool, almost like choir-like computer sequence. Cool, crazy, abstract, random AI stuff. Not really AI, but that's what I imagine what an AI would sound like. Love it. You can really hear the pipe in the mouth. Like, imagine articulating, doing it, but with a giant like potato-like thing. And like, I guess it's like one of these things here. Let me just try. See what happens if I say doing it. Doing it. Doing it. You really can't pronounce that well. Forgive me for the... It's kind of tasty wood, actually. Coconutty. Doing it. So cool. Cool. You know, there's something human-like about these things. Wow. And the reason there's something human-like is probably because it's using a human voice as the source material, I would imagine. Let's try the gossip arp here. Here in our hectic information age, that's sort of what it sounds like, all the distortion of social media. How sweet. Has a sort of sitar-like quality. Cute. Iron Man. Oh. What? Holy shit. The release trigger on the deep note here. That is a cool sound. Little too hot, maybe. And you can see I can trigger that one whenever I want. You can even go in here in sound mode and just remove the sustain and just play the release. Nothing? So cool. Love it. Italian disco. Shit. Yeah, Italian disco. Also up here, the high notes is so sweet. It's sort of growly more in the bottom, and it has a sweet sort of gentle character up in the top, more soulful. And it really feels like a clavinet on the keys. It's that sort of percussive initial character, like the pick of the guitar. Baby short. So funky and like vintage like. And you can see I'm constantly moving the mod wheel down here. And I think that's more probably because of the guitar-like quality. It's a weird mixture of the talk box because it's really a marriage between guitar and human voice. So how to play it on a keyboard, you know, this has never really sort of been done in this way. And I think that's beautiful because it's more monophonic when you really play it, though you can do chords too. But when you have all the voices on a keyboard, how to play it. So for me, I feel somewhere between a guitar and a clavinet and a human voice in my sort of playing style. So sweet. Yeah, something like that. Crazy stuff. This one is so cool. You can hear it's not the same note. Pay attention down here on the deep note, how much it changes every time. Like that's more of a mo, more of a oh kind of sound. That's more doy. So something totally changing all the time. Really, really funky when you play it. And this is where, again, normal synthesis, normal sort of just standard sampling doesn't apply the same way as ultra deep sampling. You really get a different character every time you play the keys, it's more alive. And so sustained too. And I love the random words here, really, really playable, also super funky. We also created a transition-based articulation for the talk box. So again, like other libraries, the harder you play, the more different morphing will happen. In this case here, you can play it more softly and harder. It might be easier if I just play one note here. Very soft. You can hear it gets more percussive and aggressive as I play harder. Or soft. Or very hard. Or in between. It's just beautifully artistic. So this is a transition-based articulation in the programs here. When you play it, it's enormously elastic on the keys. Based on the velocity, it's gonna get more aggressive. Or super soft. Or a little harder. So 127 different morphings as you play on the velocities on the keys, and it really generates an enormously artistic, I think elastic keeps coming to mind. It just feels like you're like glued to the keys, but in a very fluent way, like you would be on a natural instrument. So cool.